Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. During the morning rush hour yesterday in New York City, a man wearing a hoodie threw a smoke bomb in a subway train, pulled out a gun, and then shot 10 people. In the end, dozens were injured. A horrifying crime. Police have finally arrested the suspect. They did so today. We're learning a lot more about him. But first, we want to go to New York tonight for a quick update on this story. Eric Shawn is standing by for us. Eric?
Well, Tucker, tonight, this is a city relieved. Mayor Eric Adams and police simply saying, we got him.
Moments ago, Frank Robert James was stopped on the street and arrested by members of the New York City Police Department. Officers, in response to a Crime Stoppers tip, stopped Mr. James at 1:42 p.m. at the corner of St. Mark's Place and First Avenue in Manhattan. He was taken into custody without incident and has been transported to an NYPD facility. He will be charged with committing yesterday's appalling crime in Brooklyn.
His arrest history in New York is 9 prior arrests, dating from 1992 to 1998. Those include possession of burglary tools 4 times, criminal sex act, theft of service 2 times. He was arrested on a New Jersey warrant. He also has a criminal tampering. He has 3 arrests in New Jersey. 1991, 1992, and 2007. They are for trespass, larceny, and disorderly conduct.
62-year-old Frank James was arrested after a phone call to the tip line Crime Stoppers. 2 New York City police officers spotted James and put him in handcuffs as he stood on the street in Manhattan's Lower East Side in the East Village.
Officers respond to the McDonald's. He's not in the McDonald's. They start driving around the neighborhood looking for him. They see him on the corner of St. Mark's and First, and they take him into custody.
James, who has lived in the Midwest, has a full history on social media, ranting about public issues, from crime and racism to homelessness. In his videos, James said he received mental health services that made him more dangerous, claiming he wanted to kill everything in sight. And it turns out he is a repeat offender with 9 prior arrests, from sex acts to trespassing. Authorities say James set off 2 smoke bombs in that subway car, then fired off 33 shots from a Glock 9mm handgun that he bought in a Columbus, Ohio pawn shop in 2011. James reportedly bought a subway Metro card and used it to ride the subway hours after the shooting. But tonight, thanks to an eagle-eyed New Yorker and the work of the NYPD, James is behind bars. Tucker?
Eric Shawn, thank you. So what should we think of the story? We should say at the outset that not every tragedy has obvious lessons. We are hesitant to draw quick and dirty political conclusions, particularly partisan ones, from something bad that happened. Not every mudslide in Sri Lanka or cyclone in Ohio was the result of climate change. Fair. But it's still interesting to know a lot more about the man who apparently committed this crime, Frank James. Who was he? What did he think? Well, it turns out that for years, Frank James posted black supremacist rants on his YouTube channel for all to see. Some of these videos date back to 2013 and continue to very recently. He uploaded within the last few days. Overnight, the journalist Andy Ngo unearthed a number of these posts. You can go find them online. We're not going to show them to you. But we want to read you some excerpts so you have some idea of what this man was thinking. In one video he posted to YouTube, James declares that, quote, white people and black people, as we call ourselves, should not have any contact with each other. Blacks and whites, so-called, should not even be in the same hemisphere. James seemed especially enraged that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, Joe Biden's Supreme Court pick, had married a white man. Quote, I had no idea that she would be married to a white man. Yeah, our black sister Supreme Court Justice, power to the people, is married to an effing white man. In other posts, James called for violence against people on the basis of their skin color. In one video, James says, for example, that, quote, the white MFers that I want to kill, you know, I really want to kill them because they're white. Pretty direct about his feelings on that. On Facebook, he posted a meme that said, quote, oh, black Jesus, please kill all the whiteys. Why was he so angry? Well, James explained that himself. Quote, the vast majority of people, white MFers, are racist. He'd seen that on CNN, and he believed it. There were signs long before the shooting yesterday that James was dangerous and that he might act out against other people. In one instance, James filmed himself shouting racial epithets at people on the street. Quote, F you and your white ass too, you MFer. And to throw that in for good luck, I don't listen, yeah, white racist MFer. They do exist. They do effing exist. We could go on and on and on. He attacks Asians, too. Disgusting. So this guy was a racist. He was not a white supremacist. And that might surprise you because Joe Biden and some of the shills who work for him, including the Attorney General and the head of DHS, have told us again and again and again, and the New York Times has confirmed this again and again and again, that white supremacists, right-wing Trump voters, are the #1 terror threat in the United States of America. Here's Biden.
We must confront and defeat political extremism, white supremacy, and domestic terrorism. White supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. According to the United States intelligence community, domestic terrorism from white supremacists is the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland.
What a liar he is. Yeah, there are racists of all colors in this country, but white supremacy is not the main threat we face. Racial animus of all kinds is not the main threat we face. And in fact, since Joe Biden took office, there has not been a single deadly attack by a white supremacist or a QAnon shaman. At the same time, since Joe Biden took office, a BLM supporter rammed his car into a barricade at the Capitol and murdered a police officer. Then another BLM supporter ran over dozens of people, including children, at a Christmas parade in Wisconsin, in Waukesha, killing 6 people. Many more were maimed. Most recently, a BLM supporter, and by the way, an honoree of the Barack Obama Foundation, tried to assassinate a mayoral candidate in Kentucky. Again, most people who commit acts of violence like this are mentally ill. So there isn't always an obvious political lesson. But if you take 3 steps back, maybe if the entire news media tells you every day of your life that America hates you because of your skin color, you might respond to that at a certain point. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't we see more crimes like this? They're being abetted and effectively encouraged by the Biden administration and the American news media, obviously. And it's bad for everybody of all colors. Sowing race hatred, suspicion, anxiety is terrible for the country, and they're doing it every single day. Horace Cooper is the co-chairman of Project 21's National Advisory Board. He joins us tonight. Horace Cooper, thanks so much for coming on. I always feel guilty about drawing quick conclusions from tragedies like this one, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about it. But when a guy like this films himself saying things that could be essentially scripts from an MSNBC show, you have to kind of ask yourself, like, is that rhetoric having an effect on people's mental health?
Well, absolutely, you have to ask that kind of a question. The sad tragedy is there were Americans on a subway who were the subject of the hate, bile, and bigotry of this individual. Now, look, I will tell you this, and I've been observing, there has been a growing effort on the part of the wokesters to make a claim and a slur and a slander about America. America, as a country, was founded on an amazing concept that we noted in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Within 100 years of our founding, we had more Americans lose their life than have in any other war fulfilling that. And yet then, within another 100 years, less than 100 years, a man like Martin Luther King stood up. He did not use woke tropes. What he said was the Declaration of Independence had power. It had meaning. It is something that's important to each and every one of us. What the slander and the lie is that we don't think that every American is equal, that we don't think that one group or 2 groups can be judged solely by their skin color. Today, those wokesters say out in the media and sometimes from the White House pulpit that you can look at one group of human beings, white Americans, and assume whatever ill, whatever evil, whatever terrible motivations about them possible simply by looking at them. That is called bigotry 101. And by the way, the more you do it, the more you get of it.
Well, that's exactly right. You're effectively sowing race hatred. And my worry is, and they're doing it for political reasons so they can get an advantage in the next election. But what are the long-term effects? Like, that's a wound that doesn't heal quickly.
Oh, absolutely not. Racism has always been a poison. Bigotry has always been understood. It is not innate, even though if you go to UC Berkeley, they might make some kind of false claim. Here's what's actually being pursued. I call it the racial antinomian heresy. The theory that there are people that they can misbehave, they can blow up subways, they can run their car down over people, and we're going to overlook that as somehow we're making up for past mistreatment. All that we're signaling by that behavior is that more people should do it. So shame on the New York Times, shame on CNN, and shame on Joe Biden for lying to America. I came on your program and I asked, declassify the information showing that white American men are the real threat. It's a lie and it's a slur against America.
It's so funny, and everyone knows it's a lie, but they sort of nod, oh, yeah, okay. They're such liars. Horace Cooper, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you so much. Declassified. Amen.
Good evening.
So apparently Frank James, and we're working off limited information here, but according to news reports, Frank James came into contact and had been interviewed by the FBI. Apparently he had prior arrests. We read today he was on a watch list at one point. James Giuliano was the head of FBI's crisis management program in New York City. He also served as a SWAT team commander and counterterrorist operator on the elite hostage rescue team at FBI. He joins us tonight. James, thanks so much for coming on. So these are the reports that we have read. We can't verify them. Do you think they're true? And if so, what does it mean?
Well, first of all, Tucker, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
It's good news today that Frank James was apprehended, and I have full faith in the NYPD, the FBI, the JTTF, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for coordinating and making the arrest. The fact that this individual showed up on a radar, now going back to 2016 with Omar Mateen and the Pulse nightclub shooting, people ask, well, if these folks have been interviewed, why aren't they in custody? Unfortunately, you know, we've got this pesky Fourth Amendment thing in the United States. It makes it really difficult. People say hyperbolic things. I listened as you read through that slew of bigoted and awful online rantings that this individual had posted. A lot of times it's difficult. You can do a knock and talk. You can interview somebody. They can be on your radar, but you can't keep them under perpetual surveillance. And unfortunately, in a country like the United States with 327 million people and only 12,000 FBI agents, it makes it tough to make sure that something like this doesn't happen.
I think that's right. I mean, that sounds like an entirely fair explanation to me. I'm wondering about the security cameras in the New York City subway system. There are many thousands of cameras down there. We're learning that it just so happens that the cameras at this scene were not working. What do you take from that?
Yeah, so we've come a long way with technology in law enforcement. I mean, going back to the early 20th century, we figured out blood typing, and in 1930s, we had latent fingerprint evidence recovery, and then in 1987, 1988, DNA. Now, everyone is so accustomed to a one-hour TV drama where the crime occurs, it's investigated, and it's adjudicated, and the person goes to jail in one neat 60-minute package. Doesn't always work that way. The 5 boroughs of New York are about 320 square miles. And Tucker, I would submit that the vast majority of that is blanketed with either governmental, meaning police surveillance cameras, or private, you know, a bodega owner or a shop steward have cameras out there. The problem at the 36th Street station and the 25th Street station here appears to be, and again, I'm just looking at reports, related to Wi-Fi and a server issue. So the film footage was captured. It just wasn't able to be transferred expeditiously to the people that needed it, which was 1PP, police headquarters, and the FBI office at 26 Federal Plaza in Lower Manhattan.
So the cameras were operating, we just don't have the video yet. That's correct? Because it'd be a little weird that the cameras didn't work outside Epstein's cell and at this shooting, but you made me feel better knowing that it's not that big a deal. James, thanks so much for coming on and explaining all that tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
Thanks. So millions of foreign nationals have streamed into our country over our southern border. The Biden administration has welcomed them here, completely transforming the United States. Texas could shut it down. Of course, it's their border. They could send their National Guard there. Would that provoke a confrontation? Maybe. Would it be worth it? Obviously. But they're not doing that. Instead, they're sending migrants to Washington, D.C. on buses. Well, let's solve the problem. Could it just millions of illegal migrants, foreign nationals with no right to be here, to sweep over our border whenever they want? Once they've arrived, the White House has sent many of them to places all over the country, states like New York and Florida. A lot of these foreign nationals are coming through the state of Texas, and finally, the state has decided to try and stop it. Fox's Lucas Tomlinson has the story for us tonight. Hey, Lucas.
Hey, Tucker. Last week, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he would send illegal immigrants right here to the nation's capital. The first bus arrived just after 8 a.m. earlier today. 23 illegal immigrants stepped off that chartered bus, paid for by the Texas taxpayer. 19 men, 4 women disembarked, and 2 small children were among the nearly 24 who left Del Rio Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. One of the private security contractors told me they drove the 1,700 miles to the nation's capital without stopping to spend the night in a hotel. None of the migrants were from Mexico. Some were from Nicaragua and had family waiting for them where the bus pulled up just a few blocks from the U.S. Capitol. I spoke to another group from Venezuela who said they want to go to Miami next. One migrant described his journey.
¿De dónde es?
Venezuela.
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 Una vez más.
Cruzamos desde Colombia para la selva del Darién. Luego cruzamos a Panamá. De Panamá a Costa Rica, Costa Rica a Nicaragua, Nicaragua Honduras, Honduras Guatemala y Guatemala México.
Governor Abbott blamed the White House for dropping off illegal migrants in towns across Texas.
Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
The governor's office says another bus is already making its way up here in the nation's capital. Tucker?
Lucas Tomlinson, Forstein, thanks so much for that. So moving a bus of 23 illegal aliens into Washington, D.C., it's almost like a meme. Why not just move them back to the countries they came from? Why not take the Texas National Guard and keep them from coming into our country? Oh, that's too hard. But Texas is apparently taking some steps to slow the massive surge of migration about to hit this country. It's about to get even bigger. Todd Bensman has wrote a piece about what Texas is doing. He's the author of America's Border War. He's also a senior national security fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. He joins us tonight. Todd, thanks so much for coming on. Pardon my skepticism about this theater going on. It's greatly frustrating to people in other parts of the country that Texas hasn't just shut down its own border, since it always talks about how it's a country. But the state is doing something, you say, to slow this border surge. What is it doing?
Right. Well, I agree. I think that the busing of migrants to Washington, D.C. is a bit of a sideshow to the main event, which is that the Abbott administration is shutting down trade with Mexico. They're saying that they're doing it with enhanced safety inspections at the border at all these, the biggest ports of entry in America, actually, for trucking, Laredo, and also Pharr and El Paso as well, just shutting those bridges down with inspections, essentially. And they won't say exactly what I think they want to say, which is, we're going to do this to you, Mexico, until you clean up your side of the border of the mass migration that's coming. Now, to me, it seems like it's a leverage point. I think that they are hoping to get administration and the Mexican governors to respond to this. It is proving to be a major muscle that the state of Texas is able to flex. And they have a deal now, reportedly, with the governor of Nuevo Leon, they're going to announce shortly some kind of a deal where we in Texas lift this embargo on our side in exchange for border security on their side. Very interesting play. I've never seen a state be able to force an issue like this.
I mean, the problem is that Mexican governors and the Biden administration share a common contempt for America's current population and want to change it. So, I mean, it's hard to see how this moves them to action. We're sending all these guns to protect Ukraine's border, why wouldn't we do the same in Texas to protect the American border? Why wouldn't Governor Abbott do that? I honestly am confused.
Well, listen, the state of Texas has got Operation Lone Star. They've spent close to $4 billion on, plugging the holes in the line left by Border Patrol, off doing processing duty and babysitting and bringing, water to migrants while we're processing them in. So they're not out there doing drug interdiction and that sort of thing. And I think to the extent that the state can do something, they are. But ultimately, the state of Texas, if they were to round up migrants and bring them to the international bridge and try to drop them off, they would be stopped by the Biden administration's CBP blue uniforms on the bridges. You couldn't, I don't think that they can get past our own people to the midway point of the bridge. And that's really, I think, ultimately what the problem is.
Well, it'd be interesting to see who wins that fight. But it'd be nice to have a fight because the country is disappearing. So maybe it's worth having. I don't know. Todd Bensman, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the state of California is a great place, despite what they tell you. Unfortunately, it's gotten dirty and disorganized and dangerous under Gavin Newsom. So a frequent guest on this show has just announced that he's running for governor of California against Newsom in the upcoming election. He's going to explain why it shall not be infringed. Your right to have a gun, quote, shall not be infringed. That's your guarantee as an American citizen. But Joe Biden doesn't care. Your right is a hedge on his power. Therefore, as he's told you many times, your rights don't exist. He'll decide what rights you have. He reminded us that just a few days ago, once again, while announcing a crackdown on something called ghost guns, a term he just made up.
If you buy a couch you have to assemble, it's still a couch. If you order a package like this one over here that includes the parts you need, the direction of assembling a functioning firearm, you bought a gun. Take a look. Take a look at this. It comes in this package. You can see the picture down here, maybe. This one. It's not hard to put together. A little drill, hand drill at home. Doesn't take very long. Anyone can order it in the mail. Anyone.
That same day, Biden also announced he was nominating a former U.S. attorney called Stephen Dettelbach to lead the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, since the Senate failed to confirm Biden's first nominee, a lunatic called David Chipman. Very weird guy. So the question is, what do you know about Stephen Dettelbach? Isn't he any better than the guy they put forward the first time? Well, a couple years ago, 2018, Dettelbach ran to be the Attorney General in the state of Ohio. And at the time, he called for universal background checks, meaning if you give a shotgun to your son for Christmas, you need his permission, and a ban on most rifles, assault weapons, another totally made-up category. Now, a gun grabber group called Everytown for Gun Safety, Michael Bloomberg's front group to disarm you, just applauded Dettelbach's nomination, which really tells you everything. And then there's this. During the violent BLM riots 2 summers ago, in which many Americans died, Dettelbach wrote an op-ed in USA Today calling on Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, one of the craziest things ever to come before the Congress. That bill, among other things, would have ended qualified immunity for cops. That means police officers doing their jobs would have to personally, out of their own pockets, defend themselves from lawsuits as a result of their actions, even legal actions. In other words, no one would ever be a cop. Why would you? It also would have changed the standards for use of force. Now, Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee bragged that the bill would allow cities to, quote, reimagine public safety, which in many cities has been reimagined and thousands have died as a result. So here you have a guy who, at a time when violent crime is at historic levels across the country, doesn't want you to be able to defend yourself from that crime and doesn't want the police to defend you. What does that add up to? Why would he want something like that? Why would he want you helpless in the face of violence? You got to ask yourself that, and you got to pray he never has a chance to influence this country. Well, nearly 40% of voters in the state of California wanted to recall their governor, Gavin Newsom, last year. They didn't. The state has continued to deteriorate, unfortunately. Electricity prices in California are more than twice the national average because global warming or something. Gas prices are also the highest in the country.
It cost tech entrepreneur Mo Hassan $140 every 2 days to fill up his 2021 Cadillac Escalade when he cruises the streets of Southern California. Prices vary depending on where you buy. At many stations, it's still $7 a gallon, still the highest in the country. Though we've had a dip of a few cents in recent days, hardly a game changer.
So the next California governor's election is coming up in November, and Michael Shellenberger is running. You know him if you watch the show. He's a genuinely impressive guy. The more you learn about him, the more you realize that. We're happy to have him join us tonight. Mr. Shellenberger, thanks for joining us. Why are you running? Well, let me just say, the videos that you did on homelessness in California, which actually tried to answer the question, why is this happening, something no one else has asked, were among the most illuminating things I've ever seen. So on the basis of that alone, I would vote for you.
Thank you.
But tell us why you're running.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Tucker. I mean, I'm running because I'm absolutely heartbroken by the humanitarian disaster that is homelessness. I'm also extremely angry at the breakdown of social order in our cities, but even in the suburbs. But I'm also inspired by what California could be. I think we have the potential once again to be the greatest state and the greatest country in the world. We have a governor who all he cares about is becoming president of the United States. He cares more about Iowa primary voters than he does about the people of California. So I'm going to run against him. We're going to win this one, Tucker. And we're going to make California really what it ought to be, which is the greatest state and the greatest country in the world.
Well, of course, what it was for over 100 years, which was a promise to the rest of the country that things can be this great. Let me just ask you, because I'm so surprised to hear it, do you think Gavin Newsom really believes he can be president of the United States? That's so delusional.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at his Twitter feed, he's entirely obsessed with attacking other states. He doesn't talk about the disaster on the street, the fact that homelessness went up by 30% in California, even as it declined 18% in the rest of the United States, or that our electricity prices went up 7 times more in California than they did in the rest of the country, or that young women are being raped in our downtowns, in the open drug scenes, that we're suffering an epidemic of drug overdose, of fentanyl poisonings, which he's never addressed. I'm working with a movement to really take back California for the people, for ordinary people, for working people. We need to address the drug crisis, but our schools are failing our students. They've become more about the adults who run them than the students who need them. So there's so much that needs to be fixed. We should have abundant energy and water. California is rich, Tucker. We're rich in land, in water, in energy. But the pro-scarcity, anti-human environmentalists control Gavin Newsom, and they've made our energy and water scarce. I'm going to put an end to that. I'm going to bring new agreement between Republicans and Democrats and independents. It's why I'm running no party preference. You know, your listeners and your viewers can see ShellenbergerforGovernor.com. I lay out a vision that I really believe is going to bring California together.